Sex, Murder, and Sex, Murder, and Killer Cupcakes by Allison Janda. Chapter 3. Having sufficiently heaved my morning coffee into a trash can, I now sat slack and exhausted against the railing. Just because I make a living out of photographing crime scenes didn't mean I was prepared to see someone that I knew personally dead. Betsy stood over me, wringing her hands and chewing her lower lip with worry. "Should I call the police?" she asked in a small voice. "What the hell kind of a question is that?" I barked. "Of course you should call the police." Pulling myself up off the ground, I took long, shaky strides back to the main office and closed the door behind me. Sliding down to the floor, I covered my face with my hands. "You could have at least warned me." Addison shrugged. "I thought you of all people could stomach it." Alec had only been with us for a few short months, and they'd been tumultuous. It wasn't anything unusual for him to be late to a photo shoot or to just not show up altogether, hungover from a night of parties, girls, and whatever else 22-year-old small-town boys enjoyed their first few years in a big city. Granted, I'd never wished him dead. Okay, maybe once or twice, but only when he was being difficult. Still, I was far less disturbed by this news than, say, hearing that my parents had been kidnapped by a Yeti, or the small-town butcher who they both had an inherent dislike for. I'd never hear the end of that one. "I told you he was bad news," my mother would shout at me, shaking her angry fist. "What now?" Addison asked me in her trembling voice. "You're the expert." I shook my head to clear it and looked up into her sad, tired face. Suddenly feeling weary myself, my head lolled back, coming to a rest on the door, while my arms fell limply at my sides. "Well, Betsy's calling the police," I shrugged. "We should wait here." I paused. "Did either of you touch him?" Addison looked momentarily disgusted by the thought of putting her French manicure anywhere near a dead body. I couldn't really blame her. "I came upstairs to get my purse," she explained. "I saw we had some messages and decided to return a few calls before I left. Then Betsy came in and asked if we should close down the dressing room since Alec never showed." She took a deep breath. "I didn't even realize the lights had been left on from whenever he came in. He's never been here early. I didn't bother to check the dressing room this morning." She threw her hands into the air in frustration. "I thought someone just left the office lights on last night." She sighed. "I thought that was weird, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay, so I went to turn the lights off myself. I pushed open the door and saw him. Betsy was behind me. No one touched anything other than the door." After a deep breath, she murmured, "It's just such a waste of talent." With that, she was doubled over into yet another tissue, wailing over the injustice of it all. Moments later, there was a gentle knock on the door, which I tried to open, unsuccessfully, while still sitting on the floor. After several seconds of struggle, I cursed loudly and then stood and yanked the door open, practically snarling at the person on the other side. Rory raised his hands in defense. "Betsy told me. I just wanted to check in on you both, see if you needed anything." While a dear friend, in this particular instance, he was looking right through me. Still, I couldn't take it personally. I'd seen a lot of dead bodies throughout the last few years, some in much more gruesome states. Oh, and he wasn't madly in love with me. Stepping aside, I beckoned him into the office and quietly stepped out. Betsy was leaning against the wall outside the dressing room, mumbling into her phone. Deciding to make a few calls of my own, I made my way downstairs to the front doors and heaved them open. They seemed so much heavier today. Crisp, cool air licked my face, while tears I hadn't even realized were falling felt hardened against my warm skin. Swiping angrily at my face, I pulled out my phone, which was still dead. I wanted to throw the thing. Minutes later, I heard the wailing of sirens off in the distance. Somewhat in a haze, I swiped below my eyes with my jacket cuffs, then noisily wiped at my runny nose, numb from cold. Chances are I'd recognize some of the faces. No point in being unrecognizable myself with a puffy face and red eyes. It seemed like the whole of Milwaukee Police Department descended upon the warehouse that morning. Cop car after cop car, vans, an ambulance, the coroner, and even a fire truck. Our small staff huddled together in the studio, clutching the warm coffees. Our small Our small staff huddled together in the studio, clutching the warm coffees Barry had fetched for us. Barry had been with the force for a few years, but he never seemed to have grown out of being an eager young gun, constantly absorbing crime scenes like a sponge, and forever fetching warm drinks on cool days when we worked a crime scene together. Today was a little different, but suffice to say he never faltered, even as circumstances changed. Somewhere in the middle of the same questions being asked by a different detective, I heard sharp voices just outside the main doors. There was a loud bang as one of the doors was wrenched open. Then a deep voice shouted, "I just said you can't go in there." Peter's angry, twisted face appeared as he wrenched his way into the studio. "Pete!" Addison yelled, throwing herself into his arms. There was a flurry of embarrassing over-the-top passion, but it looked good on the pair, unlike how it might look for most other couples. Turning away from the detective, I caught Rory's pained reaction, but when he met my eyes, the pain was gone, and an "aw shucks" look had replaced it. Walking over, hands deep in his pockets, he sighed heavily. I hope calling him for her was the right thing. Surprised, I turned. "You called him? Why?" He shrugged, and I gave him a tiny smile. What a man. "I left my chute on the other side of town for this," Pete was telling Addison in his thick Chicago tongue. His dark, angled features reminded me of an Italian mobster. "I'd better get to see the body." Rolling my eyes at Rory, I turned back to the detective and continued to answer his questions, catching a crime scene photographer I'd seen many times before scaling the stairs up to the dressing room. That should be me, I thought. It was well into early evening by the time we were released for the day. Clutching business cards from various individuals, in case you remember anything, Addison, Rory, and myself made our way out onto the sidewalk, breathing in the clean, late-day air. I'd spent hours at a crime scene before, but had never felt quite so drained. Homicides sure were a lot more tiring when you were on the inside. Peter, who had become disgruntled and bored after only a few minutes, had left under the guise of needing to get back to the chute he'd skipped out on. He'd called Addie about an hour later, inviting her to a party, which turned into an argument about his overall lack of sensitivity and her unwillingness to unwind. She'd hung up in an angry huff and declared that they were over forever. No one, save for Rory, had paid any heed. Pete would call back once he was drunk enough to apologize, and the two would likely have mind-blowing makeup sex that night, which I was sure to hear all about the following morning. I'd been privy to their breakups and makeups for many years. The three of us shuffled uncomfortably on the sidewalk. I got the feeling that while none of us really felt like going home, we were all too embarrassed to admit it. Thankfully, Rory was the first to crumble. "Anyone need a drink?" he asked hopefully. "Oh, thank goodness," Addison said. Yes, yes, please." Linking arms, we walked quickly toward the busier section of Water Street as it gained its pulsing evening beat. Eventually, we ducked into a small bar decked out in Ireland's finest. Finding a cramped wooden table toward the back, we removed our coats before collapsing into our chairs, exhausted from the day. My stomach grumbled loudly, reminding me that I still had yet to eat anything. Later that night, our pitcher drank and our bellies full, we walked one another to the door and parted ways after much hugging and promises to keep in touch throughout the week. Our studio was shut down for investigation and evidence collection for the foreseeable future. Over drinks that evening, Addison and I had decided to make the drive north in the morning, where we would stay with my parents for a few days. Rory was going to remain in the city and hold down the fort, as he liked to call it. My radio had been a welcome distraction on the slow drive home, and I found that the deafening silence in my apartment left something to be desired. Even Fred, my red betta fish, didn't feel the need to make any relaxing swish sounds as he swam back and forth in his tank, the traitor. Running my own business on top of freelancing for the NPD left me little time to care for a more active animal. There were times I photographed a crime scene so horrific that I would second guess my decision to troll Pet Finder for a Doberman or a German Shepherd. Thus far, I'd never actually gone through with the purchase. No matter what, I refused to be the first to break. I would not be the one who made the first call to the other two, no matter how many times I closed my eyes and saw poor dead Alec with his graying face and cold, rigid fingers. Placing a hand over my mouth, I swallowed the gag. It's gonna be fine, I told myself. Classic mind over matter. Close your eyes and imagine. Nope, don't close your eyes. Deep breath. Just think about something else. Anything else. Trying not to think of something is pretty much impossible. In fact, it boils down to the one thing you can think about. Nothing prepares you to find a fellow employee dead. Moreover, you'll feel like someone has it out for you, even if it might not be the case. We'd pissed off a lot of people by writing poor reviews. I double-checked that both the knob and the deadbolt were securely locked on my door before digging for my phone, which was, of course, still dead. Damn. The charger was in the bedroom. The bedroom had huge windows, practically begging for someone to break through them. Never mind that I lived on the 9th floor, because that nonsense didn't matter when someone wanted you dead, right? Fred had stopped drifting back and forth and had instead turned toward me with a judgmental pause, his only movement the delicate fanning of his fins. Fine, I hissed. With great effort, I managed to talk myself into turning on main lights, all the while keeping myself pressed close to the door if escape suddenly became necessary. When the apartment was awash in light, with nothing amiss, I darted to my bedroom. Practically tearing my phone charger from its socket, I raced back to the safety of my soothing, sparsely furnished living room. Nothing could hide from me out here. Building a nest of blankets and pillows, I collected Fred's tank, as well as a small, sharp knife from the kitchen and a king-sized Reese's from the refrigerator. Cold dread was impacting my appetite. With Frank's tank balanced between my legs, I set about finding a non-CSI type show on streaming, impossible by the way, and tore into my Reese's. Perhaps it was from the strain of trying too hard to keep my eyes open, or maybe the lull of Frank's oxygen pump, now plugged into the floor outlet by my couch, but I don't even remember falling asleep.